I was thinking about this verse. I just want to read this verse. It's one of the most famous verses in the Bible. It is, bar none, the most controversial verse in the Bible. This is a verse that challenges people. It inspires people. This is a verse that has united families, and it's a verse that has divided families. This is a verse that brings so much joy, and it's also a verse that brings so much criticism. It's one we've talked about a little bit recently. It's John 14, verse 6. And Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. And what I want to do is, I want to take the rest of the month just looking at this one verse, just cutting it up, dividing it, looking at different parts, because I think that this might be the most important verse in the whole Bible. I think that if we get this verse right, that everything else should flow, it should click, it should make a little bit better sense. And so to try and help you do this, we've got you a gift. So you should find on a table nearby a booklet. If you don't have one to yourself, please raise a hand and we will get one to you. But this is a present. These were designed by the absolute amazing Create Friday, who are Dave and Becky, who are in our church, and they do check them out on Instagram, check them out on Etsy. They've got so much amazing stuff that you can buy, and we loved it so much that we have bought these from them for you. So the beauty of this is you've now got a wonderful notebook to write down notes in. Now, the problem of this is you've all got the same notebook. So write a name on it or something, because these are going to get mixed up, muddled up. But I just wanted to bless you with this, because I really think that these next 4 weeks are going to be huge. And not just huge for you individually. I think they will be huge for us as a church. I think these are going to be defining weeks. And if you're here and you're a man, you probably have been told that you don't remember stuff so well. If you're a woman, then you know to take notes anyway, because women seem to be better at taking notes. But if you're a guy and you don't remember stuff like me, this is an opportunity to write some stuff down, to take some notes. And then this can become something that hopefully won't just challenge and bless you today. It won't just challenge and bless you next week. This could be something where the impact of this lasts much, much longer. And I don't believe that we should ever just listen to stuff and go, that was good, and go home. I think we need to wrestle with things. We need to chew them. We need to think them through. We need to ask the question, what does this really look like in a practical way in my life? And that's what this book's to do. Write down your questions. Write down your objections. Write down the stuff that you love. Write down what it looks like. Write down what it is that you're going to implement. Write down what it is that's going to transform and change your life. And I believe that when we do that, it's going to release more power for it to then do that, for it to then work in your lives. Does that sound good? Amazing. Let me pray, and then we can get started. Lord God, we just pause at this moment in the decade, and we want to make ourselves available to you. We believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that when you speak, the mountains can move. That there's nothing that can stand in the way of your will and your plans. And God, we want to come into alignment with that. So we just pray that in this time, we would hear your voice. We would hear your spirit. We would hear your direction, Lord. Disrupt us, disturb us, provoke us, inspire us, transform us. We give ourselves wholly to you. Amen. Amen. There's a saying that I expect most of us have heard. It says, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And this is an inspiring saying, because it's basically saying that you can have big visions, you can have big ideas about where you want to go. And all you need to do is take one small step. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have all of the ideas, the designs. You don't have to know what it's going to look like before you get started. You can have a big vision, but it starts with a small step. And so the saying is encouraging for us. But at the same time, there's a warning in the saying. What it's saying is, whilst you can take a step towards your destination, if you're stepping in the wrong direction, you can find yourself 2,000 miles away from where it is that you wanted to get to. And that's why I think that New Year's are beautiful times. They're the moments when we get to pull back from the activity, we get to pull back from all of the disciplines, the exercises, the work that we get lost in, and we get to stop and say, am I going in the direction that I want to be going? If I keep taking these small steps that I'm taking, will I get to the life that I want to have, or will I end up somewhere that I never wanted to get to? And so if you're here and last year has been painful, last year has been hard, last year has been difficult, this is just a beautiful opportunity to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, I get to have a new beginning today. I get to start something brand new. I get to begin this new decade with a new chapter in my life. And that's exciting, I think. There's something empowering and there's something liberating in that. If you've had a last year which has just been glory to glory, it's been amazing, it's been beautiful, then you get to stop at this point, look back and say, thank you, Jesus, for all of that. And I'm going to make sure that I keep going in the right direction. Wherever your life has been going, this is going to be an important moment. And I think that the decisions that we make at these moments in our lives, they set our trajectory for the next decade. You know, the decisions, the ideas, the stuff that we set our lives upon in these moments, the repercussions, the impact of that goes on for years and years and years. So this is a special, significant time. And I thought what would be really helpful would be to start with an exercise. And so what I want you to do is to open up your notebook, get to the first page, and I want you to draw a line across the middle of the page, like horizontally. And on that line, I want you to put 3 vertical lines. In fact, I've got a picture of what I want this to look like, which can come up on the screen behind me. It's not that picture, it's the next picture. Is this picture. What I would like you to do is to draw this vertical line across the center. On the left, put 2010. On the center, put 2020. And on the right, put 2030. If you are here and you are particularly young, you might think that 10 years, you were like still in school. You were, I don't know how old everyone here is. Maybe 10 years ago, you were like, Katie was like, how old were you 10 years ago, Katie? She was 2. This might be a harder exercise for her than it is for some of us. But what I would like to ask you to do is to think back over the last 5 or 10 years and think about the key moments in your life and to kind of plot them out as a graph. So this is what I've done for mine. I can't remember what the first one was, but it might have been like that first big high for me was like the day Cole was born. And it just filled me with so much joy. That was just such an amazing, beautiful moment. The one before was moving to Manchester, which was pretty good as well. We then had an ectopic pregnancy, which was really painful and really hard. And so I put a really low mark in our life for that graph. And then I looked back over the last decade and I started to think, what have been some of the defining moments in my life? And I'd like you to, on your graph right now, just start putting little crosses and start looking at what were the highlights and what were the lowlights. What were the things that have defined your last decade? And they could be family things. They could be health-related things. It could be to do with your work. It could be to do with your education. What was it that defined your last decade? If you were to say thank you, what are some of the biggest moments that you would want to say thank you for? If you were to look back and say, ouch, those were painful, what are some of the moments that caused you a little bit of pain? So just draw those out, write them down. And And then when you've got to 2020, underneath 2020, I want you to write a number. And this number represents how close you feel to Jesus. And I don't mean necessarily just in this moment right now on a Sunday morning. I mean, thinking about the last season, the last year, the last period in your life. How, if you were to write a number and say, I feel, however I want to define this, 7 out of 10 close to Jesus at the moment. I want you to try and put a number to your last decade. And so I don't know what this graph would look like for you. Maybe you've got more highs. Maybe you've got more lows. Maybe it's absolutely rammed and then it's like there's just so much that's happened all the time and you've got like loads and loads of movement. Or maybe you're looking back and you're like, I don't even remember the last decade. I know something must have happened because it existed, but I don't know what shape it took. But this is an opportunity for you to look back and say, am I happy with that shape? Am I happy with that number that I've given? Am I happy with the direction of my last decade? And the question that I want you to think about is this. If my life continues in this pattern, where will I be in another 10 years? And is that where I want to be? If I change nothing, if I continue living the way that I'm living, if I continue taking the steps that I have been taking, will they be leading me somewhere I even want to go? I had a friend a little while ago, he said, you're perfectly positioned for the results that you're already seeing. What he's saying is that whilst life might happen to you, whilst there's things that you can't account for the most part, our life is a result of the decisions that we make. You create your experience of your own life. And the other side of that is, it means that if you do need a new start, if you want to see something different happen in the next decade, you've got the opportunity to make a decision right now and say, I don't want it to continue in this way. I want to change something. I want my experience of life to be something different. So what I've tried to do on the next slide, I've tried to write a couple of words that I think, that's good. So what I want you to think about for the rest of this morning is this right-hand side, these next 10 years. If you were to write down anything that you wanted to see happen in the next 10 years, what would you stick in the 2020 to 2030 side? What would be your hopes? What would be your dreams? What would be your ambitions? I was just thinking about this really briefly yesterday as I was preparing, and I was like, I want us to see new churches planted. I want us to be a church where we grow in generosity. I was thinking about myself personally. I've got friends and neighbors who don't know Jesus yet. I want to help them meet Jesus because he's just changed my life so much. I want to see people saved. I want to see eternities transformed. I want to live a supernatural life. I don't want to live an ordinary existence. I don't want to make decisions just based on everything that I can see around me. I want to walk step by step with the Holy Spirit. I want to see him burst in amazing ways in my life. I want to live supernaturally. I thought about my home. I'd love, we've talked about this for years. I'd love it if we got our own home. That'd be something I'd love to see happen this decade. I'd love it if I finished 2030 closer to my family than I did when I started. If my relationships drew tighter and they became more intimate. We fell more in love with each other as family. I want my brother, I've talked about this again at church, he's battling cancer. I want to see him healed. I want 2030 to be celebrated with him. And looking back, we're just telling stories of how God has moved in amazing ways. I want to be physically stronger than I've ever been, which isn't isn't a big ambition, if I'm honest, because I've never really been strong. So that just takes like 2 weeks at the gym and I'll probably achieve that one. But like, that's something that I want to see. I want to get a master's in theology. I want to be a learner. I want to keep on stretching. I want to keep on challenging myself. What are the things that you would want to put in your next decade? And I want to encourage you to write them down. And as you're thinking about these, as you're getting some inspiration, perhaps as you're writing down some of your plans and some of your ideas, I want to share a story with you from the Old Testament. And I believe that this story should absolutely inform this exercise. This isn't just a distraction to give you time. This story, I think, should fundamentally shape the way that we are thinking about these big questions, the targets that we're aiming for. And it's a story in the Old Testament that I think that most of you won't know. It's a guy who you could read the whole Bible and just breeze over him and completely miss him, completely forget him. And you might not even know his name. And yet at the same time, I found just some amazing inspiration from his story. And it's found in 2 Samuel chapter 6. If you've got a Bible, you can look that up and follow. If not, you can write it down in your notebook and read it for yourself later. But it's the story of a guy called Obed-Edom. Hands up if you've heard the name of Obed-Edom. Yeah, maybe 5 of us. Obed-Edom. And this is the story of King David moving the Ark of God back to Jerusalem. Now, what you need to realize is that in the Old Testament, the Ark was where they stored the 10 Commandments, the laws that were written by God. But they believed that this Ark was literally carrying the presence of God. And so when they're talking about moving the Ark of the Covenant, they're talking about moving the very presence of God, the local, tangible, magnificence. I mean, if you imagine God in all of his glory, creating the heavens and the earth, they believed that he lived in this box, this amazing, ornate, beautifully carved box, and they are transporting it. So in 2 Samuel chapter 6, it says this: David brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalahah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. That's what it's just saying. It's just saying God is enthroned on this ark. They set the ark of God on a cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, cymbals, and jazz guitars, whatever else they could find. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the ox stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark of God. And David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. So this is a crazy story in the Old Testament. They're transporting the ark of God, but they're not being careful enough. They're not being cautious enough. And an ox stumbles, the cart tips, and it looks like the ark is going to fall out of the cart and onto the floor. And so this guy, Uzzah, he goes to protect it, touches the most holy object in the world, and immediately dies. Which is crazy. And he falls down dead and everybody stops and it's like, I mean, what do we even do now? We are in such a difficult situation. We've not prepared properly. We've got the literal presence of God on this cart. We can't go forward in case it falls. We can't go backwards. We're stuck. And because they hadn't really shepherded it well, they hadn't moved it well, they found themselves in a predicament. And David doesn't know what to do, and so he does what I think any good leader would do in this moment. He buys time. And he's like, I don't know what to do. So he goes to this local business leader, this local guy, and his name is Obed-Edom, and he says, I need your house. And they move the Ark of God into Obed-Edom's house, and they just leave it there. And so to buy time, he moves it and he sticks it into this guy's house. And I don't know what this guy Obed-Edom would have been thinking. We don't really know too much more. I imagine that there would have been this mixture between wonder and terror. You know, like he now has God, the God, living in his front room. Like, that's insane. I can imagine him saying to all of his family, his kids, his servants, like, don't go near it, don't touch it. Whatever you do, this is dangerous. And his home became a temple. It became the home of God. And I can imagine what it must have been like as the presence of God just filled his house. I imagine him there spontaneously breaking into worship for no reason. I imagine them laughing. I imagine joy on their faces. I imagine arguments just evaporating and not really mattering anymore. I imagine them feeling those goosebumps as they walk near it. I imagine the smiles. They were literally there in the presence of God in their home. And the Bible tells us that they were blessed. Like this ark transformed their lives. And it didn't just transform their experience, it transformed his business. He was prosperous. He started being blessed financially, so much so that the Bible tells us that King David got jealous. Now, how rich do you have to become for a king to start getting jealous? Like, you've got to be pretty blessed for a king to get jealous, and yet this is what happened. His entire family was completely transformed. He had everything that he needed in that moment. And David came back and he was like, look, I think we need this back. I think we want the presence of God back. And so he took it away. And it feels like this is where the story finishes. But what I wanted to share with you, I guess, as you're looking forward, as you're thinking about the things that you want to place in your next decade, is that whatever you place in the center of it will transform you. If you're taking notes in those notebooks, you can write, your vision changes you. You are transformed by what you set your focus on. By having the presence of God right in the center of their home, it changed the way that they thought, it changed the way that they acted, it changed everything about them. You know, we get so lost in all of these things, and we make decisions, we make goals, we have ambitions for stuff which aren't bad, but they're not God. And whatever you place in the center is going to completely transform everything about you. It absolutely is. In Luke 11:39, Jesus tells people that they spend so much time polishing their outsides, and yet they leave the insides completely dirty. I believe that if you have Jesus right in the center of everything, that he will transform everything about you. You don't need more happy experiences in your year. You don't need to be protected from the painful experiences in your year. You don't need to look forward and say, well, if we could just get rid of that bottom half, if we could just get rid of the struggles, if we could just get rid of the pain, if we could just get rid of the problems, then I'll be okay, then I'll be happy, then everything will be all right. You don't need that. What you need is a better center. You need Jesus in the middle, and he will transform who you are. That book I said I was reading by Dallas Willard, he says this. He says, the greatest need that you and I have, the greatest need of of humanity in general is the renovation of the heart. That spiritual place from within us, from which outlook, choices, and actions have come to be formed by a world-denying God. Indeed, the only hope for humanity lies in the fact that just as our spirit has been formed, so it can also be transformed. We are transformed by whatever we place in our center. And I think that the problem is we live in a world that denies the spiritual. We live in a world that tells us that we are just a mass of cells. We are just bodies. And that might sound like a weird thing to even say, but there's a guy who literally said this. His name was Christopher Hitchens, and he's a famous atheist, and he got cancer and he got sick, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor said to him, you've got a sickness in your body. And he said, I am my body. I don't have a sickness in my body. I am my body. You see, if there's nothing spiritual in our lives, then we are just our bodies. You are your IQ. You are your sickness. You are your health. You are that cluster of cells. And when we look at our children, what we fall in love with, what we raise are cells. We are just bodies. And you might think that's a weird way to think, and yet this is actually how so many of us think in the church as well. When we get to New Year's, we make our resolutions. Yeah, well, my resolution is to be able to bench press 12 kilograms, like whatever it is that you guys are challenging for. My goal is to be able to run to the newsagents and back. Like we think about ourselves as bodies. Or my goal is to learn some stuff to become cleverer. My goal is to surround myself with people, but we set our sights on things that are purely practical, purely physical, and we deny the spiritual. And when we deny the spiritual, we deny the thing that is actually the most transformational in our lives. It's when we get our spiritual lives right, when we get God in the center, that's what changes everything. What we place our vision in will change us. The second thing I wanted us to recognize is that your vision will also determine your impact in the world around you. I bought a little while ago a record player because I just didn't feel hipster enough without one. And I started buying records because they just bring me so much joy. I love it. We've got it now in our kitchen. And when I just had a hard day, I'll come in and I'll put on some country music. And I'll just sit back and not that kind of country, the good country music. You don't know. You might know. But I love it. And I just unwind and it's amazing. And it just changes the atmosphere of my home. And then Emma will come in and she'll take the record off because she's not about country music. And she'll put on Frank Sinatra. That's the one that she's bought. Yes. And then she'll start kind of dancing around the kitchen and the dining room and just listening to a bit of swing, a bit of jazz. And she loves it. And then Cole comes in the room about halfway through the first song, rips that bad boy off. He's like, no, we're listening to David Bowie in this house. And so he will then put on David Bowie and then he just dances and Leo gets his crazy moves out. And it's like just our house is full of music and it changes the atmosphere. And what I want you to realize is that you are that record player. You can only have one record playing in your life. And the record that you choose will determine the environment that you live in. It will change everything around you. And if you're not sure what record you have playing, listen to the words that you speak. What are the words that are coming out of your mouth? What are the experiences that people around you are having? That should show you what the sound of your life is. You know, misery loves company. If your record is blues, you will start seeing blues everywhere you go. If your record is joy, you will start seeing joy everywhere you go. The record that you choose to place on the record player of your life will not just transform your life, it will transform the lives of everyone around you. You get to set that tone. Obed-Edom, his life doesn't finish at this moment. This is his 15 minutes of fame. That's all we really read about him. But then what you find if you continue reading the Old Testament is this guy's life, it starts popping up in really random places. You find him he's mentioned in the temple courts as a steward. They're listing stewards, and his name pops up as one of the stewards. A little bit later, he's listed as one of the treasurers. He's listed in another verse as being one of the worshippers in the temple. And it's impossible to know for sure if this was the same guy, but it's a reasonable guess to expect that this is the same person. And the question that you should then be asking yourself is, what is this businessman whose business was so prosperous, it was going so well that King David even got jealous? What is this landowner who has this house that was big enough to stop 30,000 people to go into and to put the Ark of the Covenant? What is this guy doing in the worship band? What is this guy doing as a treasurer in the temple? What is this guy doing on the welcome team of the temple? Why would this guy be doing that stuff? And the only thing that you could say that these three different jobs have in common is their proximity to where the Ark of the Covenant was stored in the temple. And so it's impossible to know for sure. But I think it's reasonable to guess that he had this experience of God in his home. And that once they took that ark out, it was like life just didn't exist anymore. Nothing else had that same feeling, that same emotion. Nothing mattered like the presence of God. And so he left his farm so that he could come and be in that temple. Because all he really wanted was the presence of God. There's a psalm that was written, and it's one of the psalms that nobody knows who wrote this. And I imagine Obed-Edom speaking out this psalm. And it's Psalm 84. And it says, "How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, it faints for the courts of the Lord. For my heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They're ever praising you. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked." This businessman, he has an encounter with God, and then nothing will ever be enough. Nothing will ever be right. I want you to know that if you look back at your last decade, and you're not sure that the graph is what you want it to be, if you look at that number and you say, "I'm not as close to Jesus as I know that I could be or should be," nothing will change until you change. It won't just happen. It won't just right itself. It won't just suddenly fall into place. Nothing will change unless you make a decision and say, "I'm going to leave the farm and come to the temple. Because my heart, my soul yearns for something more. I know that this last year I've been chasing my career. I know I got that promotion. I know that I've been trying to get that relationship right. I know that I've been working on my family. And yet it doesn't matter how much I focus. It doesn't matter how much I do. Nothing is going to fulfill me until I get God right in the center. And that won't change until you change. You have to make that decision. Emma and I have spent the last week away in Scotland. And for us, I don't know why, Scotland's become like a holy land for us. And we wanted to get away and just ask God, what is it you want to do with this church? Where are you taking us? What is it that you want us to be focused on? Should we be going for this many people saved, meeting Jesus? Should we be going for multiplying churches? Give us some numbers. Give us some target. Like, give me something that I can then share at the front of church, and everyone will be inspired and they'll clap. And we'll be like, yeah, we're going to change the world for Jesus. And give me something inspirational, preferably that rhymes or with some alliteration. Like, that would be really, really beautiful, God. Tell us what it is that you want our vision to be. What is our focus? And he just said to us, the vision is Jesus. There's nothing more, it's nothing less. And I know as you're sitting there, I'm standing here saying, I'm like, but how do we count that? how do we measure that? How do we do that? What does that even mean? And don't mishear me. I do think that Jesus in the Bible really does give us some clear stuff about what this does mean. We're going to be spending the next few weeks trying to unpack this. But first and foremost, before anything else for us in this church, our vision is Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, you can get so in love with leading worship that you love worship more than you love Jesus. You can get so inspired and excited about sharing the gospel with everybody that you love evangelism and spend no time with Jesus. You know, I believe that God has amazing things for your family, but don't mistake that your family doesn't come before Jesus. Your work is a gift from Jesus. And if you don't get this thing right in the center, nothing else will fit around it. You know, we use the word lost in church a lot. And I don't know if we fully understand what it means. When we say that someone is lost, what we really mean is that they haven't got God in his rightful place. And you can be in church every single week singing praises and be completely lost because you haven't got Jesus in the center. Because you've been putting other things first. And those other things can be amazing. They can be the best things. But whatever you place in the center is going to become the song that you sing with your life. Whatever you fix your focus on, you will actually become. And so we fix our focus on Jesus. And when you do, you will share the gospel. Because you just love Jesus. You can't not tell people about him. When you do, you will be singing worship so loud because it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You just love Jesus. Your work will be different. Your disciplines will be different because they're not about just forcing yourself to do things. They're an expression of your love for Jesus. Your whole life will flow completely differently. Do I know everything that God has got for you in the next decade? I do not. I know that some of it's going to be beauty and some of it's going to be pain. But I do know that if you have Jesus in the middle of it, then he will make sense of it all somehow. It is only when we have Jesus that anything really makes sense. I mean, think about it. If life is just about living, if it's just about your career, then you can invest in stuff. You can go to the gym. You can get that body that you want. You can have those relationships and it'll be great, but it will finish. And maybe you even invest in your kids and you say, my focus is the next generation. You can invest in them and they will be great and they will live. And I'm really sad to say this, but they will also pass away. And one day this entire world will pass away. And if you make the meaning of your life in stuff, in ambition, in your body, in your relationships, in power, it will all end. And it will be meaningless. And it will be forgotten. The Bible tells us that only 3 things are eternal: faith, hope, and love. And we only understand any of them through Jesus. When we know Jesus, we discover faith. When we know Jesus, we realize that hope isn't just optimism. It's It's the fact that he's working for us on our behalf even when we can't see it. In 1 John it says that we know love because he loved us first. Jesus reveals what love looks like. Life only makes sense when our vision is Jesus.